Tēnā tātou katoa. It's my pleasure to open our hui, first of all with a few words of welcome and then a karakia to start our hui. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā whānau, ngā hāpori, ko tai mai nei, I rungi te kaupapa, I whakawhaiti nei tātou I tēnei wā, tēnā koutou katoa. Nō reira, e kore e ware tia I a rātou mā kua wheturangi hia, nō reira, te hunga wairua, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou hoki. Katahi anō ka hoki ki a tātou nei te hunga ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnei te karakia hei ti mata a tātou nei hui. Tēnei te ara kei runga, tēnei te ara e rangi, te ara o tēnei tupua, te ara o tēnei areki, te ara o rangi raua ko papa, rarau te pane o tāne, rarau te tangata ki raro ki a tīna, tīna, hui e, tāeki e, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Matua Kevin, for opening this really important milestone event today, and a very warm welcome to everyone on the Zoom joining us and via Facebook live stream. We really appreciate your time and interest, especially at this pressurised time for the sector going through varying levels of lockdown. Ko Monica Briggs Tokawingawa. I'm head of centre at the Centre for Social Impact, CSI for short, who have been the backbone entity through the journey to date for this work on the strategy and action plan for community governance. Today is the culmination of so many people's efforts, passion, insights and vision to work towards all community organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand being well governed. We have 500 people joining us this morning, which shows the enormous energy and momentum that is built around this kaupapa. This work has been based on a key principle of partnership, and this morning is a fantastic way of seeing that in action and being brought to life. And I want to do a really big shout out to our initial investors, Auckland Council, Foundation North, Grant Thornton, the Department of Internal Affairs and the Rata Foundation. This work would not have been possible without the belief and investment put in by these organisations. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Joe Cribb, our relentless and energetic project manager and sprint facilitator extraordinaire, and our amazing sprint leads who all said yes as soon as Joe approached them. We hope you haven't regretted it. We certainly haven't. And Jade, if you could pop the next slide on. If you could use hashtag community governance, all one word, you can see it on the slide. It will be great to get the messages from today out further and shared more across the sector. And the next slide, you can see the format of our 2 hours together. There's an awful lot of amazing content to be shared, and we will be making this available to all of you because we're recording the event this morning. And then the next slide, there's just some quick housekeeping guidance. So please use the Q&A function. The chat function has been disabled, and Mele Went will be managing a slot towards the end of the session around questions raised. And we encourage you to post questions throughout the event. We'll also be polling you during the event, so please participate when you see the questions appear. It's just going to be 3 quick questions towards the end of our time together. As you will have realised, your mics and videos are disabled, so any problems, please use the Q&A function. It is now my absolute pleasure to hand over to Mele Went, Chair of the Community Governance Steering Group, who CSI has had a formal agreement with to help guide and navigate this work, and she'll give you some content on the important mahi. Mele.
Thank you very much, Monica. Tēnā koutou katoa, whalawhalawa, and warm greetings to you all. The community sector, not-for-profits, NGOs, charities, and community groups play such an important part in our country. While there is some excellence in governance, this is not consistent across all organisations. Research shows that the quality of governance in the community sector is variable, There have been several studies and surveys over the past few years into New Zealand's community governance, which highlight the considerable governance issues facing the sector. We also know that the current cost of governance failure is high. In the last decade, over 5,000 New Zealand charities have been deregistered, losing their charitable status. 95% of these are the result of the charity failing to meet its duty to file an annual return, which is a failure of governance. Other costs of staff time and staff morale in managing a poorly functioning board, of poor decision-making, no or little strategy, ultimately results in costs to communities for the positive impact not being made. But we also know that there are many strengths to build on and a willingness to do so. The recent post-COVID Time to Shine survey identified strengthening governance as one of the top 5 challenges needing to be addressed to shape the future of the community sector. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to shape the sector through courageous leadership and new collaborative models of governance. There is growing discussion and a call for reimagining the future shape of the sector, funding and delivery to increase efficiency and effectiveness. Governance will need to be at the forefront of shaping not only organisations, but the sector as a whole. Good governance will be essential for a more resilient sector. There is an increased appetite for collaboration. The discussions we've had and work we've done for this community governance project have demonstrated that appetite and what is possible. Many organisations and community leaders have worked collaboratively to devise our action plan, which aims to contribute solutions to the pressures and opportunities that present themselves in governance across the community sector, especially for small Tier 3 and 4 organisations. The vision is that all community organisations in Aotearoa are well governed. The National Action Plan, which is this beautiful product here, is for the more than 500,000 committed community board members serving their communities to make good strategic decisions and navigate changing environments. Community governors succeeding means that their organisations thrive and so do their communities, our communities. We set out to work in a collaborative and responsive way to identify the key actions that will make the most difference to Aotearoa's community sector. It is with pleasure that we launch and present the National Action Plan for Community Governance here today. We've received a message from the Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector, Honourable Poto Williams, who's unable to attend but relays the following message. I have read the report, the National Action Plan for Community Governance, with interest. I am heartened by your vision to improve the governance ecosystem for all community organisations in Aotearoa. I have seen firsthand that strong communities lead to a strong nation, and this must be supported by strong community governance. I was impressed by the breadth of the sector's contributions to the recent governance sprints. These joint efforts will help to ensure that the outcomes are fit for community needs. I commend the hard work of everyone involved in addressing the current challenges and encouraging best practice for community governance. I wish you all the best with your work going forward. End of message. Me taki ma'ata, and thanks a lot to the Minister for her wonderful support and encouragement to all of us. Just a reminder that with the Q&A session shortly, feel free to post your questions and also to like the questions that have already been posted if you'd like to see those particular questions answered. Right, so it's now my pleasure to hand over to the Project Manager Extraordinaire, Joe Cribb. Joe will tell you more about the project findings and the action plan and MC the next section of our program. Welcome and thanks, Joe.
Kia ora koutou, and it has been my absolute pleasure to be working with an amazing group of people to develop the National Action Plan for Community Governance. But if we stop and think about what is the current state of community governance in Aotearoa, of course, we know, if you'll put the next slide up, Jade, Of course, we know there are amazing examples of excellent leadership, excellent governance across the community sector. But recent research reports have shown and concluded continuously that the capability and capacity of our boards and committees is variable. In particular, research completed by Rata Foundation and the Nelson City Council found that organisations in the Upper South Island, their membership of the boards did not reflect the changing demographics of who they were serving, and that better chairing, better meetings and more efficient decision making would enhance the governance. But induction and board development was limited, and many board members didn't fully understand their roles and responsibilities as governors, and some didn't have some of the basic skills like financial literacy. And these results were echoed in the 2019 Centre for Social Impact Report, What is the Future of NGO Governance? And research in the last few months in the post-COVID or the continual COVID environment shows that the challenges of COVID mean more than ever we need the leadership and governance of our organisations to be strong and consistent across the sector. So we'll move to the next slide. So when we reviewed around the country, we found that there are some organisations that are providing incredible support to boards and board members, and we'd like to acknowledge all the amazing work they do. But access to support and resources is variable across regions, and some boards have very uneven access to the support they might need. So a group of organisations and community leaders came together with the shared vision that all community organisations in Aotearoa are well governed. And together they volunteered and have formed the steering group for community governance to provide the expert leadership of this work. And I know it's not quite appropriate to say, but aren't they a handsome bunch, my friends? From my perspective, they really have been holding tight to the principles and vision of this work. So thank you to them. The principles that we've been working on have been critical and absolutely driven every part of the work that we're doing. They are here in no order of importance. But the great work that we want to amplify, the great work that is happening already. We want to, there's no point in duplicating or competing. We see this, that there's so much work to do that we want to actually build on what is already happening there. We have been completely focused on the needs of those who this strategy is for, those of the amazing 500,000 volunteers who work tirelessly to govern these organisations. You are the centre of this strategy. And of course, we want actions that are practical and tangible and real and relatable and will work for you where you are and meet your needs. And of course, everything has been driven by and with our community. So in order to create the strategy, we'll move to the next slide. We used a process of co-design. We put a call out wide, and we were amazed when more than 150 people volunteered their time, mostly during lockdown, the first lockdown, and we had more than 1,000 hours of collaboration went into the sprints. And when we had a look at who had volunteered, they came from all around Aotearoa, from the far north to the deep south, from small countries, from high country farms, from urban centres. So we really got an absolute views and perspectives from everybody, and that very much embrace the diversity that is the community sector. Those that participated brought their experience of governing in all types of community organisation, all sizes, all purposes, Māori organisations, marae committees, you name it, there was somebody bringing their perspective to the sprints process. And we were joined by those who perhaps work in day by day in government and businesses, but by night are community volunteers. So we celebrate you all in working together to create this action plan. We'll move to the next slide. We put the action plan together by using co-design sprints, and it is a methodology where for 2 days on Zoom for most people, which is amazing, and we did do it. They were long days. We worked through a process of identifying the actions that would work for the people that we were serving, prototyping and developing them. We were then lucky enough to be joined by talent challenge teams during these 2 days for short sessions to really challenge and test and make sure our thinking was as good as it could be, and the actions we were proposing were as relevant and as impactful as they could be. In total, there was 7 sprints, and each of the sprint generated 2 or 3 actions, and the actual plan for their implementation as well. We've documented the process we used and the good, the bad and the ugly of using a sprint process. From our perspective, it is a powerful tool for collaboration, and we've created a document, a report called Sprinting for Good that we will release in late September and early October that outlines how we did this. So the next slide. As I mentioned, there are 7 slides, so 7 sprints. And each sprint was very much focused on a challenge within governance. And through our consultation and research, we knew that these were the kind of key challenges or key issues or the key areas for opportunity for strengthening governance in the community sector. And so the first one there was that all community governance group members have the basic skills they need. Now, these are skills like financial literacy and understanding the responsibility of governance that are critical to being able to be an active member of a board. The second sprint was about all community governance groups perform their governance function well. So this is about boards working together as a team, making good decisions, holding good meetings, and having a good dynamic and culture around the board. The third sprint there, everyone values community governance. We were very focused that community governance is visible, celebrated and valued by not only the community sector, the governance community, but the wider public as well. Of course, that there are diverse and talented governors being appointed to community boards was a focus of one of our sprints, and we'll hear from the actions first up. We were also very interested that best practice, because we know there is fantastic practice and excellent leadership happening, was identified and shared widely so that we could all learn from it. The critical role that board chairs plays was the focus of one of the sprints as well, that we know that this is a critical role and it's often a very challenging and lonely role, so how can we support chairs to be as effective as they can be? And a Māori governance sprint focused on ensuring all kaitiaki exhibit and role model the behaviours they need. And this was to ensure the specific issues unique to Māori governance were covered. So the next slide. So in total, 15 actions make up the National Action Plan for Community Governance, as they were all identified through this collaborative sprint-based process. And they range from actions that are aiming to provide immediate support for boards now, particularly navigating the next year, but also to create sort of generic systemic change as well. And now we will move on to our sprint leaders and hear more about the actual specifics of all these actions. So it is my real pleasure to introduce our first sprint leader who will speak first. So over to you, Simon Telfer.
And not. Kia ora koutou, welcome to Aotearoa's Got Talent, not Britain's Got Talent, and I'm Simon Telfer and not Simon Cowell. Imagine hundreds of diverse and talented community leaders seamlessly joining NGO and community boards. Well, that was the challenge we set ourselves. Strong boards make for strong organisations, and strong boards need to be made up of people with a diverse range of experiences, perspectives and knowledge. Together, this leads to more effective decision making. We address this challenge through the lens of 4 invented personas, really trying to deeply understand the impediments to individuals trying to get on boards and some of the challenges and fears those existing trustees and board members have about welcoming different thinking and different background to their boards. So from this, Aotearoa's Got Talent evolved. How's it going to work? Well, firstly, we're going to profile over 1,000 diverse and talented individuals seeking board appointments and make that freely accessible to all community organisations in Aotearoa. This addresses the challenge that diverse candidates are often invisible outside their communities. We will build our talent pool by partnering with organisations including Te Whare Huka Huka, Te Moana, and New Zealand Asian leaders. Secondly, we're going to encourage individuals to profile or showcase themselves via video. Traditional board appointment processes of submitting CVs and cover letters, well, these disadvantage candidates, especially those with limited governance experience. Seeing and hearing an interested applicant sharing a life experience or community contribution provides these individuals with a far greater chance of being successful. Finally, we're going to leverage the existing Appoint Better Boards community and website. Rather than trying to build an audience up from scratch, we believe it's better to link to an existing board appointment website, particularly one like Appoint that's trusted and already receives about 14,000 views a month. The sprint was extremely well facilitated by Joe and Jade, using all the functionality of Zoom soon after the first COVID wave. The diverse backgrounds and voices we had in the team allowed many views to be put forward, and this resulted in such a strong initiative. But we're really excited about the potential for Aotearoa's Got Talent, and we're keen for potential funders to partner with us. Kia ora. Here we go, something I'd prepared a little bit earlier. Next slide, please, Jade. So just to recap, we had a fantastic team for our sprint. We're really committed to diversity, really committed about the benefits that diverse thinking, that experiences and backgrounds and life experiences can bring to boards. So, we did imagine hundreds of diverse and talented community leaders seamlessly joining NGO and community boards. We imagined it, and we don't think it's actually that far away from being reality. Next slide, please. There were three key aspects, and one of them that I featured in the video was Aotearoa's Got Talent. So I'll just talk about that a little bit more, and then we'll talk about the other two very important ones as well. So the idea is about making sure that everyone's able to connect very easily, making people visible, being able to profile them and showcase them. But also for those organisations that are going, look, we'd really like to bring some more diverse talent onto our boards, but we just don't know where to find them. So the whole idea is to make that very much transparent and to make it free of charge. We're really excited about the use of video, and I'll just recap on that a little bit. That I see a lot of CVs in the work that I do in board appointments, and if you don't have governance experience, it is difficult on a piece of paper to stand out from the crowd. You watch someone and you speak to someone, you get really excited and get really motivated, and you hear about something they're doing in the community or a life experience. And again, we feel that video can play a really important role in doing that. Finally, Appoint Better Boards has been around for about 8 years, and it's very community centric, and we'd like to partner with that organisation or with an organisation that's similar rather than starting from scratch. Jade. This really excited me because I've seen it work very well in national sports organisations with Sport New Zealand, and that there's an expectation that if organisations are going to receive funding, that they look at the boards that they have in place and are encouraged by way of that funding to ensure that the boards reflect the communities they serve. So looking at bringing a code together, a framework, so that expectation is set, and also some support and resources are put in place for those organisations that are receiving funding to ensure that their boards that people have thought about the boards, and that they represent the community that they serve. And understand that won't be for every organisation, or will be for every organisation, but we will make sure that the size of the organisation is taken into account. So again, the tiers for the not-for-profit sector will be taking those into account. Next slide, Jade. Diversity Matters is again about showcasing and really celebrating when things are successful, because there's lots of organisations that are doing this very, very well, but if we don't sort of sing it from the rooftops and showcase it, it's very difficult. So we'll be working with capability organisations to ensure that diversity is more prominent within community boards, and then to share that widely, share it from an organisational level, but also those individuals that have been leading that, support them to advocate it and to show best practice, and for other organisations to learn from that. The final slide. Where to from here? Well, we've put a lot of work in, but in some ways the work has just begun. So the diversity code for funders is going to be subsumed into the Good Governance Code, and that is underway at the moment. For Diversity Matters, I understand that we are we were in talks with, and this is progressing very well, with a government department and with a large local government council. So the Diversity Matters program is going to evolve from there. And then Aotearoa's Got Talent, we're ready to kick that off. We're just looking for some funding. So if there's organisations out there that think that showcasing talent is a great idea, then we're ready to speak with you. So kia ora, thank you, and I'll hand it over to Sue.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, I'm Sue McKay from Philanthropy New Zealand, based in Wellington. I was involved in the sprint, how can we ensure community governance is understood and valued? And this is really important to achieve if we are to see the overall vision for the national strategy, that all community organisations in Aotearoa are well governed. Understanding what is involved in community governance is critical when coming onto a board and to ensure performance in the role. And understanding will lead to community governance being valued. And this isn't just important for current or aspiring trustees, it's important those that work and volunteer for community organisations in operational roles understand and value governance. Our sprint was the first one out of the blocks, to use a racing pun. Techniques like having personas that we needed to consider the challenge through the lens of helped us consider other perspectives. And another really worthwhile technique was having the challenge group who came in twice during the 2-day sprint, and their fresh eyes challenge really helped keep our recommendations grounded. We had great ideas galore, but the sprint process quickly helped us focus on 2 ideas. The first was a Governing for Good social change campaign to raise the profile and understanding of the impact and importance of governance volunteering. This will be led by Volunteering New Zealand, and Colenso BBDO has offered support for the campaign. The second project was given the working title of the Atapai Index, an index of kindness and caring. The aim is to benchmark and measure organisational generosity, including supporting staff who take on community governance roles, as a way to encourage more of it. So a huge thank you to CSI who have snowballed this initiative, and also a shout out to the people who steered, funded and participated in this initiative, which is harnessing the time and the commitment to the power of community in Aotearoa. Kia ora.
Morena koutou, this is Sue live now in a virtual sense. Just before I talk about the sprint, I'd like to just talk about my experience very briefly of community governance. In addition to my day job, I'm a co-founder and trustee director of 2 organisations. The first one is an 100% volunteer-led and run organisation. It's small, the Community Comms Collective. And therefore the governance is so simple, you know, it's not overworked, but it does need to be good, very good at that basic level. And the other organisation is the Good Registry, and that's quite a bit more complex because it involves a registered trust and a social enterprise company. So it requires skill to navigate those. It's about fundraising for charities, so transparency and trust is very, very important. So just wanted to acknowledge that, because community governance is so wide, from those multi-million-dollar operations through to those tiny groups that are volunteer run that also, you know, do so much good in the communities. So as the video said, the question was, you know, how can we ensure community governance is understood and valued? And obviously this is really critical to the vision, and the sprint felt so interconnected with the efforts of the other sprint groups. So it's a wonderful opportunity today to hear the different ideas that will come together to achieve the vision. So as I said in the video, so I won't overlabour it. Maybe we could have the next slide, please, Jade. There is quite a wide number of groups and people out there that need to value community governance, and it's not just the obvious ones of current governors and aspiring governors. And, you know, one important group in there to mention is that staff who work for not-for-profits need to fully understand the role of their governance body and the benefits and how they can use and support and help their boards. Also current volunteers, I don't know how many times people who are incredibly skilled and volunteer already for a community organisation they feel passionate about, but they lack that confidence and understanding and knowledge to maybe step up into that governance role. So they are seen as a key group for this sprint. So as I said in the video, we just had so many great ideas. The possibilities were just endless, and it was such a positive topic to spend 2 days brainstorming. So might just get you to move on now, please, Jade. So of the 4 ideas, 2 are being progressed and 2 are sitting there, and I'm sure will be progressed a bit further down the track, and mentioning them in case anyone is interested in maybe picking them up and running with them. So the first idea that's kind of in the parking lot at the moment is a promotion and education service for the not-for-profit sector. Now, a strong message that came through in our sprint is that if governance in the community sector is really understood and valued, then the sector as a whole needs to be understood and valued. The massive kind of contribution and the criticality of the work that the community and voluntary sector does. So this first idea seeks to help that wider valuing, and through promoting what it does and also providing useful resources for the sector in one place. The second idea there is regional meetups, which would support current trustees to get together and share best practice, but also bring in those aspiring trustees and people who are interested. And this is a wonderful way to gather together the people at a regional level who support governance, the stakeholders, and the many different partners interested in this topic. Next slide, please. So the two ideas that are being progressed, the first one is what we are calling in the interim the Governing for Good social change campaign, and a big shout out to Volunteering New Zealand for leading this campaign, and Colenso BBDO for being the creative partner. The video talked a little bit about this campaign. So the success measure that I'll talk to is when current volunteers sign up for governance. So they're taking that step up. These are people who are already giving their time and show that they care about the community sector, and also having a sustainable pipeline of volunteers so that when a group is in need of a director, they find a high quality one fairly quickly. Thanks, Jade. The second one has the interim title of the Atawhai Index, and this is basically saying what's measured is valued and gets done. We know that there are so many giving corporates out there that give financially, that support their staff to have volunteer days, that support the community sector in all sorts of ways. So this is about making that kind of tangible and encouraging more in the corporate sector to do this. It would include all sorts of giving, but within that, it would have a focus on who is stepping up to community governance roles. It would target corporates initially, but it could include all types of employers. And the initial success would be 20 companies participating in a 6-month trial, and it's intended to be a self-sustaining user pays system. So very interested in hearing from corporates who would be interested in taking part in that trial. Next slide, please. So lastly, it's just a huge thanks. Up here on the slide are the names of the people who were involved in the sprint, who gave up 2 days of their time to effectively have fun and think about the possibilities, and then get really practical about how to achieve them. And also to the challenge members, which was a great initiative in this process of bringing in fresh eyes and constructive challenge a couple of times through those 2 days to help keep us grounded. Obviously, Volunteering New Zealand and Colenso BBDO are taking a lead in one of the campaigns, which is great. And then a big thanks to Joe and to Jade. We were the first sprint, so in some ways it was trialling the process, and it worked brilliantly. And we're also incredibly grateful that we managed to get our sprint in face-to-face before lockdown, which now we realise how special that was. So thank you very much, everybody.
My name is Barry Baker. I'm a partner at Grant Thornton. And as you can see, I'm filming from my at-home studio today. So please forgive the feedback, and hopefully the quality of the camera work. Look, I wanted to say I was very pleased to be invited to both participate and to support the national strategy for community governance. I was also really pleased to be asked to lead one of the sprint groups, focused on one of the outcomes that sit underneath this strategy. The outcome our sprint group focused on was called, how can we ensure best practice community governance is identified and shared? And our challenge statement, which expands on that a little bit, says, how can best practice and NGO community governance be identified and shared? How can boards be and committees be supported to innovate who will lead this work, how it will be resourced, and how it will be sustained. And we knew it was critical that this outcome was addressed to support best practice, because we know that currently there are few mechanisms available to capture best practice, or that where existing best practice resources and knowledge can be found and shared and curated. There's also a need to provide support that is not solely online or self-led to improve inclusivity. So going through the co-design process, there was 2 actions that the group decided on. The first one was an enhanced knowledge hub. And the aim of this enhanced knowledge hub is to build on existing infrastructure to create a central online repository or pointing system directory, perhaps, that meets the needs of those governing community organisations. The second action was around mentoring services. The aim of the mentoring service is to provide support for boards, including mentoring coaching for individual and board to board. The idea is that the service will be delivered by a network of trusted volunteer mentors, and it will be suitable for people coming onto a board for the first time or have been around the tracks a while and just need some more education. I'm pleased to say already 2 working groups have been formed and are already progressing these actions. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Barry, as I said, and welcome to the live part of the presentation. Jade, if we can jump to the next slide, please. I've got to say this is a bit surreal because it's the first conference I've ever presented at where I've followed myself as a speaker. So once I get past that, a bit of a shock, come on to the live presentation. Look, my part is going to be relatively short. I'm not going to repeat any of the content that come out of the slides, but out of the video. But I've got the slides following will give some written summary of the video if you want to look at that later on. And I've found too that the outcomes that came out of our sprint has actually been merged or taken over by actions from other sprints and will be talked about in detail elsewhere. So what I was going to do, what I am going to do, is just share my experience with the process. So Jay, do you want to just jump to my last slide as probably the most useful one, and I'll go from there. So I guess I just wanted to say I was actually really cynical about this initiative right from the start. I mean, the goals were very broad. It was going to require a lot of people, a lot of organisation, and some really sticky problems. And while I absolutely acknowledged there was a need and could see it in my day-to-day job, lots of people have tried and failed. And once again, to be brutally honest, if Jo Cribb hadn't been involved, I probably wouldn't have taken part. But somehow she met with myself and one of the Grant Thornton partners, and we ended up saying yes to everything and giving money. So I'm still quite 100% sure how that happened. And then we moved on. I've also been part of design processes before, both as a lead and a participant, and you can safely say they had mixed results. Usually it was a coming together and getting all excited and writing things on sticky notes, and then nothing happened. Then to add on to that, to add to my cynicism, lockdown 1.0 hit, and Jo put forward moving design process online, and my cynicism really kicked in. But Jo continued to benignly bully, and we continued on. And now I've got to say, at this waypoint, looking at what's been achieved, what the outcomes are, and the actions that are actually taking place and feel real, myself and my cynicism have to eat my words. The online co-design experience was actually better than I've had in real life experiences. It actually was a useful experience where you could, when you had a break, you could actually go upstairs and have a cup of coffee or talk to your wife or do whatever needed to be doing at home. The tech worked well, it forced certain behaviours, and the best thing I think about the online experience, I could wear shorts and a t-shirt and not feel like I was out of place. Just on the design process itself, the concept of how the challenge groups were used as an explicit role and a respectful role to challenge the design and output of the sprints worked really well, but it really needs to be managed and have mature responses where it's happened. So just to finish, my view now is, and my contribution is that collective action can be very effective. The design process online can work really well, but you really need someone like Joe to facilitate and drive the process along with the backbone organisation like CSI providing logistics and advice. So I'm an absolute convert now and look forward to supporting the initiative going forward. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Joe.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Jo Brosnahan, and I was involved with a sprint that looked to ensure that boards could perform their governance functions well. We worked really well together, and in the final event came up with two main projects. The first of these is to create governance standards which will clarify just what success looks like for boards. These will be supported by tools for self-evaluation and checking, and to help build capability, including the possibility of accreditation. We wanted to be clear about what success looked like and help boards to be able to get there. The second project is more about addressing the whole ecosystem within which community boards can survive and thrive. We've learned from COVID just what we can do together as a community. So taking that concept that we can do things together, and each brings skills and capabilities. It was the concept really of other sectors wrapping around the community organisation. Unlike sponsorship, which is more transactional, the idea was to have collective ownership of outcomes. So the idea is that the other organisations would be able to mentor and support the CEO, board members, be present at the board table in a support capacity, provide expertise and skills away from the board table, and shared services and so on. Most importantly though, the concept of collective ownership means that they will be receptive and agile in terms of helping the community board deal with the types of issues that boards have to deal with right now. So the concept really of community leadership is that we're in this together. Kia ora koutou.
Well, Morena, you can see I won't be being asked to be a video presenter anytime soon, but I would just like to say that the involvement in this sprint was something quite special, and I would like to acknowledge Joe. I like the term benign bullying is, I thought, quite correct, but you actually need that sort of energy to make these things happen. And the fact that we are here today, I think, is really, really significant, Joe, for you and Jade and all those people in behind you. Could I just say, I think that community governance actually involves community problems, and that in turn requires people to be at the table who are seriously engaged within the community and with those issues. And they're not always there because they have governance skills. In fact, often those with governance skills don't have all the other understanding of the issues at the core of what's being addressed. And we try and often deal with those issues by helicoptering in the people that actually have governance skills, and quite often they can push not-for-profit perspectives off course. They're not always the right people. So the concept of our sprint was really about performance, but performance of those who should be at the table. And ensuring that they got the support and the skills that were necessary to enable them to do their job. We want them to actually have the confidence and the understanding of what is required in order that they can be the best they can be. Next slide, Jade. So we're involved with coming up with two main ways to do this, as I've just described earlier. One was the idea of co-designing a code of good governance, and that in turn would have not only the code, but would also have tools and such in behind it. The second one was to actually develop some new models of community governance, which I'll talk further about. Jade, thank you. So the Good Governance Code was really based on that idea that as a starting point, particularly for someone new to governance, it's really important that they have an idea of what is good, and that's well defined and simply and clearly defined. And what's good in the corporate sector or the public sector is not necessarily always what is best in the not-for-profit sector. So we do need to differentiate, and the tools will vary. They might be standard tools, but they will look different, and they should look different. So it was an idea of coming up with best practice in community governance that actually recognises also that community governance goes from very small organisations to very large corporate size organisations, and that again, that will differ. And the idea then that there'll be co-design processes to actually come up with that, that in behind will sit available and accessible tools and the opportunity to develop and train those involved with governance. In order to ensure that it happens, it was really felt that funders should be a part of that ecosystem to ensure that there is appropriate support going in around governance of the organisations that they're funding. Jade, thank you. And the second project was really about that whole broader ecosystem. It was the idea that we're not in this together, that actually community organisations are trying to deal with problems that are actually right at the core of community, which we all belong to. And so the idea of differentiating between sectors and so on, and that we somehow all have different purposes, is really not what it should be about. So the idea that around any not-for-profit in a community sits whole lots of business, government and others who actually have skills and experience and support that they could offer. And the idea that they perhaps could stand up and have a responsibility for being a part of the solution. Jade, sorry. So then the idea here is that, and we used as an example during our sprint the Taitokoro Education Trust up north, where in fact the trust itself has got representation from the very community we're serving in terms of the low decile community and getting digital learning into place. But even around the table in an executive role or semi-executive role, support role, providing mentoring, support, ongoing funding, accommodation, administration and so on are a network of other corporates and public sector and philanthropic organisations who basically support this organisation and have it at their core. So the idea they're in it together is really important, and in fact the use of things like integrated reporting for the corporates, ensuring that government funding actually comes with an understanding of the other support and such that's required, and that perhaps that doesn't just mean providing money and stepping aside and using a very transactional measuring system, but actually being in there and being involved. It's that concept of we're all in this together. So I did like to use that idea of COVID, and look, we could do it then. Unfortunately, COVID-2 doesn't look quite as enabling, but I think we need to still remember that what we did in COVID-1 was the right model. Jade? So the final slide here is really how do we go about this? The idea is to look at where this is happening, and there are lots of different models of where organisations are working together, and sometimes it's not-for-profits working together, but public, private, not-for-profits working together to in fact enable community outcomes. Telling those stories then up online, developing, identifying the social, community, economic benefits identifying ways in which these can be shown and demonstrated by corporates through their integrated reports and so on. And I mean, I think the measure that was identified before, there are some other outcomes here that go with this. And then, so to do that, we obviously need to have a project lead and so on. Finally, I'd just say, I started referencing Joe and the model that had been used. I think what was brought to this project right at the beginning was energy. And I think energy is the key element to actually sustain things like this. So I guess my plea to everybody would be, if you've got energy that you can contribute, resources are great, but if you've got energy that you can contribute, this needs ongoing energy because it needs to be got over the hill. Kia ora koutou, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Kirsten Patterson toku ingoa. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Directors here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Here at the IOD, we believe in the power of good governance to transform communities. Boards, trustees, and directors need great people leading them. That's where the stewardship and the leadership of the chair comes in. We know great boards have great chairs. By developing a high performance and effective governance culture through leadership, empathy, compassion, and humour, a good chair is critical to board performance. At a personal level, through my work with the Wellington Homeless Women's Trust, I know firsthand the challenges that chairs of community organisations face. So how can we ensure the boards of all community organisations are well chaired? The sprint team I had the pleasure of being involved in decided the focus should be in two key action areas. Number one, supporting people in chair roles by looking to provide mentoring and development opportunities for new and emerging board members and chairs. And number two, ensuring bite-sized micro-credential training is available online to new and aspiring chairs, and also through the development of building communities of governance, learning and practice. That's our way forward. It was refined, challenged and supported through a great and diverse sprint and challenge group, all committed to help ensuring that chairs of community organisations are all well supported. There's lots of hard work ahead, but it's going to be fun and make a real difference. Come and join us. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. My name is Kirsten, but everyone calls me KP, and it's my really great honour to be involved with the sprint around chairs and ensuring all boards in New Zealand are well chaired. Jade, if I can move on to the next slide, please. And I'll move on from our title slide. Fantastic. As Joe Cribbs said earlier in the session today, the role of the chair can sometimes be felt to be a very lonely one, particularly in the community sector and particularly for those smaller community organisations where the chair is also having to support in many ways, be the CEO and be hands-on management and carries a significant load. There's about 115,000 of us who are chairs of NGO and not-for-profit boards, community groups right across New Zealand, and we encompass a huge number of sectors and sizes and budgets and constitutional arrangements right across our wonderful country. So we're a sector that desperately needs help and support. Jade, if we can move to the next slide, please. So the chair plays a really critical central role in the stewardship of the organisation, its sustainability, our relationships with our community, with our staff and with our volunteers. And one of the most critical roles is in ensuring that the chair is helping lead the development and purpose and values of the organisation. And it's critical that we have really well supported chairs in these roles. And the work that we've done with this sprint team, I think, is really going to take a giant leap forward for chair support in this country. If we can move to the next slide, thanks. The sprint team and challenge team we had did a phenomenal job. I was incredibly impressed with the range of skills and backgrounds and experiences that they brought to the table, and during that Zoom experience over 2 days really challenged each other in terms of the development of some personas, for what chairs could be facing and how we could help ensure that service delivery is really in place to help those chairs feel supported. We brainstormed a range of ideas, and the sort of personas that we came up with were everything from newly appointed chairs, or with those who had aspirations to be chair in the future. How do we support them in their development? Long-standing chairs who still need development and support, and those reluctant chairs, especially those who are dealing with really difficult board or organisational issues that they need to face, because of course the breadth of issues that chairs are facing are as diverse as the organisations that we're there to support. Jade, if we can move to the next slide. A couple of key actions which I highlighted in the video, but I just want to take you through in a little more detail the two key action areas that we're focused on to start with. So Jade, if I can move to the next slide. Tuakana tēnā, mentoring for chairs. This one links in with some of the other work streams that you've already heard about. A core theme coming through a number of work streams was the importance of mentoring, but also particularly the importance of connecting with each other, connecting people in this sector to share their knowledge, to share their experience, and to build community. So this work stream will be connecting in with those other work streams. There is a working group underway, and we're going to be piggybacking on some of their work to make sure that chairs are supported in that space. So that really recognises the two-way learning as well. This is not just about experienced directors and chairs coming in and sharing their experience with aspirants. It's about that two-way learning and conversation, because we all know that from mentoring relationships, you learn just as much as a mentor as you do as a mentee. Jade, if we can move to the next slide, thank you. The second focus area for us, and one we think will have a significant impact for chair support, is the Aotearoa NGO Chairs co-learning community. And here we're aiming to provide really timely training and support for new and aspiring chairs. Where do you go? Where do you get that support at a time when you've just taken on a chair role? And where do you get that sort of ongoing development? And we're going to be looking to develop some bite-sized online training modules that will assist people, particularly right across the country, so they don't have issues about access. We can help remove some of those barriers around cost, and making sure that this is available for everybody, where they are, in a way that they can learn at a time that's also reflective of the fact that the majority of our chairs are volunteers. They're doing all of this in their discretionary time. So finding large blocks of time to get away for training can be really difficult to fit around family commitments and also our paying day jobs. So that bite-sized online training will be incredibly critical to helping people access the support that they need and really help build that capability. So once those sort of programs are in place, we had a vision for this in terms of expanding into communities of learning and practice, whether that's across industry groups, whether that's across different sectors, perhaps regionally. So we think there's huge opportunity to connect people so that we can share the community of knowledge that we know is existing. Jade, if we can move on to the next slide. In terms of how do we sustain this, what is this going to look like? In terms of the outcomes we're looking for, increasing expertise across chairs in the community, looking for a robust selection of matching of mentors and mentees. We know that really great mentoring programs have those good systems and structures in place. We're going to be really respectful of people's time and respectful of their commitment, and making sure that those structures are in place, and that'll be consistent across the mentoring programs. And that ongoing support and evaluation. I think you've already seen a theme coming through with the work that Joe's outlined, even just the learnings from the Sprint program, consistently through this program, a real view about how do we evaluate and also how do we take the learnings and share them. In terms of the outcomes for the co-learning community, increasing diversity in the chair and deputy chair. So building on the work that Simon and his team are doing in their Sprint as well, we need to make sure that we've got diversity in our chairs and our deputy chairs. And making sure that that training is high value, it's got profile, and it's available, and people are accessing it right across Aotearoa. Jade, if we can move on to the next slide. So really just a call to action at this point. As Joe Brosnahan said, if you've got energy, come and join us. As others have said, if you've got some opportunity to be able to support some of the funding too, please do come and join us as well. This, I think, is genuinely the greatest initiative for community governance that we will have seen in a generation. And with all of our support, we can ensure that the boards of community organisations are well chaired. And I'll just reiterate my plea, please come join us.
I guess COVID showed us the power of different groups coming together with a shared kaupapa. So the opportunity to be part of a community of practice that aims to equip kaitiaki with the tools, resources and support network needed to confidently serve their communities was, for me, simply too big to ignore. I was fortunate enough to lead 2 sprints, the basic skills sprint and a dedicated Māori sprint. And the topics are vast, so agreeing challenge statements up front to frame the conversation was really important to keep us on track. The first activity in the design process was creating personas to bring the kaitiaki to life. And this helped ground us in reality, so whatever actions we developed were relevant and practical. For me, though, the pivotal part of the process was coming up with the prototype ideas. Using the breakout format, groups use the personas to develop at least three ideas. And then after that, the group selected the final ideas that would be taken to the challenge team. Participants got to work on the idea that resonated most with them, and across the sprints, there were some key themes that emerged. Having line of sight of those through our facilitator was quite important. It helped us to identify any overlaps with some of the other sprints, dependencies, and just to fine-tune our ideas. For the basic skills sprint, it was pretty clear that many kaitiaki simply don't know where to go to get information about their community of practice. And we finally agreed on 2 interconnected actions. The first, a portal to easily access all information needed by a community of practice, a one-stop shop, if you will. And on board, a push mechanism, leveraging the company registration process to connect kaitiaki to a platform. For the Māori sprint, our wero or challenge was around modelling the right behaviours. And 2 ideas came out focused on showcasing Māori decision-making and reconciling law, L-O-R-E, with law. The first is a really ambitious campaign that has huge potential to be transformative. It aims to raise the profile and value of Māori decision-making and governance. And the second supports that. It's a video toolkit that provides visual content for kaitiaki to see what governance could look like through a range of lenses, and role models, expected behaviours. I think that everyone was a little anxious about the session with the challenges. It's daunting having someone come in and pull apart your precious ideas, but the process achieved a lot, and the challenges input really allowed the teams to further iterate their ideas. Overall, I'd say there was a real appreciation of the challenge session. Another impression going into the co-design process was not everyone knew what to expect. There was a real sense of urgency to get some actionable ideas, but because the co-design process through Zoom was unfamiliar, there was an element of, will it actually work? Luckily, we had all the ingredients for success: a highly skilled, well-prepared facilitator, expert technical support, and a highly motivated group. And that's actually one of the things I think is really worth commenting on, is the mindset of the participants. I mean, at the outset, we agreed to a set of rules of engagement, or tikanga, to frame the conversations we're about to engage in. And we shared some whanaungatanga to build the relationship. And I think this really set the tone for working together and allowed the teams to build trust and respect. And it helped that we had a shared kaupapa that was continually reinforced by reference to our wero, our challenge, and the personas. Would I say the process was a success? Absolutely, without a doubt. Participants responded well to this highly organic, fluid, iterative process and remained highly engaged throughout. And many went on to join the next phase of putting plans into action. It's been an absolute privilege, and I'm really excited about how these sprints that I've been involved with and the others that you'll get to see achieve the tremendous potential that they promise to do so. So kia ora koutou.
Morena koutou, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa. Really appreciate everyone's attentiveness in this early part of the morning. We're almost at the end of this part of the hui, but I guess it's really just the start of the journey we're embarking on. As others have done, I just wanted to share some thoughts and aspirations about how we bring these actions into life and how these can be measured and monitored, and how we maintain the momentum of these compelling ideas. There are some elements for success, and we're fortunate to have these in abundance. So Jade, if you could move us to the next slide. You know, we've heard in the kōrero so far, you know, talking about life experience, community, connections, working together, kotahitanga. So these are all the elements. There's a real sense of community and being strongly connected to a kaupapa that is grounded in reality. We had a lot of those ingredients as part of the various sprints that we participated in. But what's going to be really important is how we know we will have succeeded and what does success look like. Jade, next. So some of the factors for success are clearly things like creating awareness, bringing that awareness to the broader community. And governors feeling confident, or kaitiaki feeling confident and putting that knowledge that they're going to gain into practice. And at the community level, it could be reflected through the existence, you know, of a community of advocates who are willing to share with others and the content, contributing to the content that has been created. It's pretty clear that one of the steps is to set up an evaluation framework with a set of outcomes so that we can actually see the real impact of the change in behaviours. We also need observable data that confirms the number of users, the experience that people are having. So Jade, what I'd like to take you now on is a journey of what could be possible and how we know we've fulfilled the potential that was promised. And to do this, I wanted to introduce one of the personas that we used in the basic skills sprint, Simon, and as a proxy of our community, because this is really one of the crucial things is the community we're working to support. So just build an image of Simon in your mind. Simon's from Tauranga, he's 43 years old. He's busy with his accounting career in whānau, and he's a reluctant chair of a small community board. He's not really self-directed and doesn't really know what he doesn't know. Let's fast forward 3 years. The board is newly registered with the Charities Commission, and as part of the registration process, Simon and his fellow kaitiaki receive alerts from the Navigator tool for community governance. So on the slide that you're seeing in the basic skills work stream, there's an onboard pilot and then there's a platform or a navigator portal. And these two work very closely together, but we're leveraging, I guess, existing platforms. So the registry, we're hoping to make connections where people sign in, for example, if they're a new director, and that process will trigger, it'll push out some information and the governors will receive these links to these platforms, which will act as an enabler. So let's, and the content. So the other thing is accessibility and the quality of the content. So we're needing to make sure that the quality of that content is useful so that Simon has access to a whole world of information, a virtual kite, if you like, of knowledge. And what should we expect to observe to reflect that success? Well, the first thing is Simon would be really excited to share his knowledge of the platform, and he's referring it to everyone that he knows. In his role as chair, he'll be exhibiting far more confidence in making use of the knowledge that he's gained. And he feels well supported through a network of some wonderful new and diverse connections that he's made. In terms of the Māori sprint, another of our personas was Kataraina. So she's 29. She's from Lower Hutt. She has affiliations with Ngāti Raukawa and Ngāti Tama, and she sits on her whānau trust, but she isn't exactly sure what governance is and her role in it. She's a bit disillusioned because there's so little content available about Māori decision making in the public domain, particularly mainstream. Let's roll forward 3 years. Kataraina is thrilled to see this fantastic new awareness campaign that is actually showcasing Māori decision making based on Te Ao Māori principles. And through this, Kataraina has connected with others and contributed to the content in a video toolkit, which was all about displaying behaviours. She's also written a paper on Māori governance and has, and this has been incorporated by the IOD's Māori governance training program. So what should we observe in terms of success? Again, it goes back to that confidence. Kataraina has a newfound confidence in what she has to offer, including a sense of pride that the rich traditions of Māori decision-making are valued. She's joined a cohort of governance professionals and shares her knowledge to this receptive group of peers who also value these perspectives and have become advocates. Now, the importance of the 3-year period is that impact is best measured over time. The initiative is grounded in reality through lived experience, and I've seen a few comments through the chat. You know, it is really important that we remain connected to our communities. So the shift in behaviours of Simon and Kataraina and others in the sector will need to be monitored, and this can be done through a range of tools, online surveys, interviews, and web analysis. But capturing the stories, the kōrero, can be a really powerful narrative to showcase each of these personas' journeys. And it will also inform the continued improvement. Jade, next. So what about the wider community and sector and how we can work together? Well, at the outset, we talked about elements for success. We have many of these elements. We've got a cohort of passionate community governors who have contributed significantly to some very big ideas. But we're really going to have to understand our sector. We're going to have to do some sector analysis. We're going to have to develop greater engagement in community communication strategies, and already seeing, you know, the huge amount of interest through the Q&A. I mean, I genuinely think there are opportunities to develop these. We're going to need to build our community of practice, to break down barriers, and just learn to work effectively together with our shared kaupapa. And of course, we need funding, and we've already heard a little bit about that. The promise of this whole program is huge, but it's not about being exceptional. It's about changing the system so that concepts like Māori decision making, like valuing volunteering, are valued and normalised. So if I was to cast myself into the future and what it could look like, I'm going to leave you with these parting images. Jade? Kia ora koutou. Maybe we'll leave it just for a few little minutes for people to have a look. And now I'm going to hand over to Mele. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. Thank you so much to Joe, Simon, Sue, Barry, Joe Brosnahan, KP and Tony for your informative presentations this morning, and for your leadership in your respective areas of work and in your work in community governance. Thanks also to the other 140 people who worked hard on those sprints, and some of whom are still working on the key actions to take them to the next step. Most sprint participants were only involved in one sprint, and so one of the purposes of today was to enable sprint participants to hear about the other sprints and their key actions. So we've just had a really good overview of the 7 sprints and the 15 key actions, and I hope everyone now has a good sense of what's in the action plan and what we're proposing to do. Obviously, you can read all the detail of the proposed actions in the action plan document, and that's just been posted on the CSI website, which I'll tell you the URL of shortly. Now, in terms of next steps, well, this is where the rubber hits the road. Our focus will be to ensure the actions are well developed and effectively implemented in collaboration with the community sector and in collaboration with key stakeholders such as government, philanthropy and community sector peak bodies, alongside of course the community organisations that this work is here to support. Implementation and delivery of the actions will build on what's already there, with different partners contributing their expertise. To move this forward, there will be 2 phases of implementation. The first phase is to provide immediate and widely accessible support and generate change. This will be achieved by a series of the interrelated actions aimed at changing behaviour. A good governance code for funders, using registration processes to signpost expectations for best practice, which is the On Board initiative, and running campaigns to promote the value of community governance and new models of community governance. These activities will be coupled with the development of support for boards, including an enhanced knowledge hub, a large-scale mentoring program for new governors, some resources for new chairs, and the video toolkit for Māori governors. The second phase is to embed sustainable best practice through promoting talented future board members, working intensely with a cohort of boards, and encouraging increased business investment in community governance. The campaign to promote the value of Māori decision-making in governance and the Tuakana mentoring for new chairs will also be included in this phase. Of course, none of this will be possible without funding. We are doing the groundwork to seek funding for the first phase of implementation, the first 3 years to develop, prototype, and implement the first wave of actions. Plans for the ongoing sustainability of the work after this initial 3 years of funding are currently being developed, including revenue generation, as an example, a small fee for mentoring, corporate sponsorships, both in kind and cash, and working with government officials on a multi-year funding budget bid. Some of the programs are also likely to become business as usual for the partners delivering them, and with some new external funding will be incorporated into their operating costs. The task ahead is considerable, but absolutely doable with your buy-in and support. What do we need from you, or how can you help? Download and read the action plan at the CSI website, www.centreforsocialimpact.org.nz. Share the plan widely with community organisations and anyone you think will benefit. The Zoom recording of today's event, which includes all of the PowerPoint slides and presentations and videos, will also be available online at the CSI website. But really, enlist in the movement. If you're not already on the CSI database receiving notifications about this project, then please email info@csinz.org and ask to go on the database to be kept informed. Very importantly, email us your feedback, your suggestions, your offers of support, such as to be a mentor or other ways you wish to be involved in the plan and any of its actions or the project more generally. We're committed to utilising as much of that support and offers that we receive. Together, we'll make some real inroads to realising our vision that all community organisations in Aotearoa are well governed. I want to elaborate on something Joe Cribb mentioned earlier. We're proud to be implementing the publication called Sprinting for Good, Using Co-Design to Collaborate for Social Impact. Its purpose is to document in detail the successful co-design approach that we used and the lessons learnt, which we believe will be useful to other organisations wanting to try a co-design process. This online document will be launched in late September, early October, with the purpose of stimulating debate about collaboration and the mechanisms and processes that can support it. So keep your eye out for that. So we're now going to change tack and pause for a bit and ask you to do the quick poll that we've got below. So you'll see the poll button there down the bottom of your Zoom screen, where there are 3 simple questions that we'd like everyone to answer. And while you're doing that, I've been looking at all the Q&A comments and questions that have been coming through. You're welcome to add in another question if you haven't already before we start the Q&A session. And just to advise that if we don't get an opportunity to answer all your questions, then we'll be devising an FAQ document adapted from all the questions and our responses, and this is going to be uploaded onto the CSI website at some point in the future. So hopefully everyone's done the poll or doing it, and I'm now going to take a look at some of the questions that came through. I think we'll start with the first one because I thought it was pretty awesome and provocative. So from Peter Sykes. Oh, my poll thing keeps popping up. Here we go. Why is the community sector required to have higher standards of governance than every other sector, especially when the sector is at the bottom end of the pecking order with funding? Again, I'm required to be more accountable and scrutinised than anyone else. Well, my immediate reaction, Peter, was that I don't think the community sector is required to have a higher standard of governance. I think for New Zealand, universally, there are standards of governance, and it doesn't really matter what the type of organisation is that you're a governor of. We have standards that we want to uphold. I think the issue really is that in the community sector, the standards of governance are pretty variable, and we need to support those organisations in the community sector where they're struggling, where their governance isn't up to the standard that is generally universally accepted. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. I see Joe's head nodding. Did you want to comment, Joe? Crib?
No, I think you did a fantastic job. I can understand and empathise with Peter. I can imagine that, with all the grants and everything that he has to apply for, and the many calls on his times to be compliant and accountability, I just say, Peter, keep up the good work. And this project is all about helping you and your governors, fulfil all those requirements in an easier, more effective way.
Awesome. Marie, the Māori Governance Sprint applies to all really, as every organisation takes into account mātauranga Māori, particularly in kaitiaki, in its governance. Do you all agree, in particular, tangata whenua participating? So, Tony, would you like to answer that question?
I mean, I would, but I actually think that part of my kōrero was around that everyone is comfortable to answer this question, because when something is embedded in the community, then others are comfortable to handle this topic. But absolutely, I mean, I think the Māori Governance Sprint came at the end, and it was actually brought, I guess it was someone that came up with the idea, why don't we have this? It was something that, came and was generated internally from the STECO. So I think that was a really positive thing. But absolutely, I mean, there are elements that we've seen across all the earlier sprints that are, that make sense. That the difference is, how do we then ensure there's that cross-fertilisation of mātauranga Māori across the system? Kia ora.
Kia ora. Does anyone else, do any of our other panellists want to answer that question? Want to add to the kōrero? Okay. The concern with some organisations is that they look at the work status of ethnic, migrant and former refugees interested in the board. And if you're not a professional, like a manager or having a high position in your workplace, even though you can prove to be a good leader in the community. So how can we convince organisations to give everyone a chance at governance, regardless of their employment or community status? That's a really good question, and it all speaks to a more diverse range and that pipeline. So who Joe, who's the person who did the pipeline one, or the diversity? Who's best placed on the panel?
Simon will be incredibly excited to answer this question.
Fantastic. Simon.
You'll have to paraphrase it again for me, Joe.
It's basically, so we, especially where ethnic migrants, former refugees, etc., people who might be new to this country, and or basically the question is around, if you're not a professional, but you have absolute potential to be a fantastic governor, how do we convince organisations to give those people a go?
Yeah, it's tough. I often use the refrain, no one was born with governance experience. So everyone was in that situation at one stage, and that's, you know, worthwhile remembering. I think there's becoming a greater acceptance from boards that they don't need everyone around the board table that knows governance intimately. So I think, I think, you know, the mentoring programs that are being put in place are helpful. They don't move the dial hugely because it's only a one person at a time, but I think it is showcasing that individuals can come on there and learn. I think it's just it's also the board appointment panels that are put together, that if you don't have diversity on your board appointment panel, you tend to get people appointing people that are similar there. It's how you really scope or outline and have a clear criteria as to why, what you're looking for. And if that is purely skills-based or experience-based, you will keep getting the same answers. If it's, we need the voice of a certain community, or we are genuinely open to someone and they don't have to have lots and lots of government experience, that's what opens it up. So there's some ideas there. It's not, I don't believe it's a supply side issue. There is plenty of individuals out there can contribute. I believe it's the demand side, reframing within boards, actually being open and not by dint of how they frame the position, automatically rule out 95% of the community.
And Simon, the TikTok initiative, or using the TikTok concept of Aotearoa's Got Talent is exactly about this, because the often very formal process of CV, people are just flicking through and seeing you've got no governance experience and putting you in the no thank you pile. So this gives an opportunity to showcase in your own words and your enthusiasm and the skills that you can bring. So do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'll be honest that I've been guilty of that, and the hundreds of boards that I've helped put together, you do unfortunately get a little bit siloed in your thinking, and occasionally you'll have seen a CV and then you meet that person at an event or something and you go, oh goodness, that, you know, that just didn't bring it to life. And that's, I know there's been some questions on the Q&A today that has been about that digital divide and everything. So I think we're using the use of video to enhance and to give an alternative, not to replace the traditional. Because so I think we need to just ensure that we don't think this is going to go one way or the other. But the energy that can be brought in, or the ways of thinking, it can really lift what would look a little bit not as inspiring on a piece of paper. So yeah, that's why video is something we're keen to embrace, just to give individuals an alternative way of showcasing themselves.
And Joe, do you think that the media, the media campaigns to promote the value of community governance might help in this area?
Well, we want to make a lot of the amazing, we know that there's about 500,000 New Zealanders that are on boards, and a lot of their amazing work just goes unnoticed or unrecognised. And so the idea with the Valuing Governance campaign is to showcase, and also to showcase it incredibly, we'll probably do it through telling people's stories, and to showcase again the diversity of the leadership that is on those boards, so that people can see people like them on boards, and hopefully that encourages everybody to step up and put their hands up.
A comment there about some of the unexplored actions that came up in the sprint, for example, the education and share one. I think it's fair to say that there were lots of other really good actions that came up in the sprints. Some awesome initiatives, but unfortunately we had to just absolutely prioritize and distill those down to the most critical or important or doable actions that we believed should be prioritized. But yes, there is the scope longer term to do some of these other key actions that came up from the sprints, like the like some of the ideas that have come up. There's a quick question around the tech that we used, which proved to be successful. I think that's about the co-design, the online co-design process. Did you want to answer that, Jade?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't expecting to answer questions, but really just use a simple Zoom with breakout rooms, and and had the challenge team join us within sharing that link. So it was a combination of Zoom, combination of interactive PDFs where people could download and just type straight into, the persona or the challenge statement. So just kept it really simple where possible. So, and an excellent facilitator, Joe Crook. So,
with fantastic technical support from Jade. You also used the whiteboarding function so that you could, present when people were giving their findings, we're reporting back the whiteboarding. And yeah, so there were lots of emails that also went on during the Zoom process, etc.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, it's as part of the Sprinting for Good document, it'll be an online document, and we're including everything that we used, all the interactive PDFs, every template. It's all there. It's all open source. So if you're thinking about using co-design, hopefully we will share absolutely everything that we've got, so that you can try it in your communities.
Thank you. I think Tanya Jones asked a really good question. How will these initiatives work alongside existing for-profit companies offering these services now? Joe.
So we, the kind of strategy we've taken is very much an abundance approach to this. We think there is so much support that is needed. We think there's so many opportunities for different ways of addressing these issues, and obviously we are presenting some of them here. Many of the organisations that are for-profit, we've worked alongside, and again we'll collaborate. If somebody else is in the best position to do something, we will back that. Again, we just go back to our principles. The first one is no duplication, no competition, because there's just too much mahi to do, too much opportunity to support people. So we'll be working alongside and collaborating where we can.
Awesome, thank you. There's somebody's interested in what success looks like for boards. Is this going to process focused or outcome based, as the impact of board decisions may not be fully understood in the short term? Not quite sure. Who would like to answer that? Not quite sure what you mean by
yes, silence. Silence is dead on a Zoom call. So should I just make some noise until somebody else? Watch out, people, panel. If you don't talk soon, I'll start singing, which is probably the worst possible thing that could happen. But in terms of outcomes for the actual action plan, you'll see when you download or have a look at the document, we've created a really tight framework, because there's no point in generating a whole lot of energy and not knowing if it's making impact. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can measure and understand the impact of the work that we're doing here, and I think that's incredibly important. In terms of, I guess, an individual board and managing its own impact, and you're absolutely right, often decisions that are made today, we don't see the results for 5, 10 or even generations time. But again, we would be encouraging boards as part of the good practice to understand and put in mechanisms in place for them to understand their impact. I'd assume that would be part of the best practice work. And
Mele, could I perhaps just add to that? I mean,
sure.
In terms of best practice, I would actually say yes, that's part of, what the code might look like in terms of what does good governance look like. And personally, I always think you should start with outcomes in terms of being really clear about what those look like and how you measure those. The process needs to underpin it. I've seen when it happens the other way around, good process, but actually we've sort of perhaps forgotten what we're here for, and forgotten about the strategy and the, always looking out, those sorts of things. So I think that's part of that code, making sure that board members know what good looks like, and that should have a very big part of that should be measuring outcomes, being clear about how to develop strategy, how to ask always that big question, what is it we're not thinking about here? That's the place boards should sit, whereas I think a lot of boards tend to sit in the process place, because that's easier often, and it's not necessarily always a good place to be. So I think the code, good practice, includes all of those perspectives.
Awesome. Ka pai. Tanya Kay here asks about makes a point of sometimes diversity taking priority over tangata whenua, and as we shouldn't be bundled up in diversity. While there's been a lot of diversity and inclusion conversation today, which is great, I haven't heard any response to Māori as a treaty partner and their position in this country and on boards. Until we can address tangata whenua issues, it is unlikely other ethnic diversity issues can be authentically addressed. I absolutely agree with that, Tanya. Who would like to make some comments around this very good point? Kevin, did you want to have any, make a comment there? Sorry to put you on the spot. As a kaumātua, yeah, and a governor, chair.
Well, absolutely, Tanya's right, and those issues do need to be addressed, consistent with the organisation that is seeking, board members. So it's really consistent with the objective of the organisation. So where tangata whenua should absolutely be involved, then they should be involved, and not be lumped together, I guess, for want of a better way of putting it, with other people. But that's all I can say really, is just tautoko, but it is horses for courses, and that the organisation and what it's for to be considering tangata whenua, if tangata whenua should be involved as part of the governance plan.
Kia ora. Tony, are any of the actions in the Māori governance sprint, will they help in this area?
I think absolutely. Because we have a group of a diverse group representing community, representing marae, bringing a range of perspectives in that space. But I think the point that around, again, I feel like I'm kind of like just repeating myself, but this is a conversation that we need to be able to have, and others, comfortably have. So totally agree with Tanya. It's not an easy one to solve, but we definitely need to be at the table. I think that's the key point, right? And Simon's point earlier around the composition of the people who are making decisions, for example, that's going to be really important. And this is not just true of Māori, right? It's every ethnic group. I think that's probably the point as well. People need to have their own voice, and the community is actually, we shouldn't speak for them. We need to be able to listen to their voice and respect that. So that's probably all I've got to say.
Yeah, awesome. I think Sam Farmer asked a really good question. What did we discuss about engaging chairs, the development of boards and chairs who perhaps cannot see the need for development? Right. So who'd like to answer that? Who hasn't spoken? Yeah.
I think that one's sitting with me. In terms of the chair sprint, yes. I can tell you, Sam, that actually one of the personas that we came up with was exactly that scenario, because we were looking at great chairs for boards and how chairs are supported, even those reluctant chairs who don't realise that they actually need some development. But the rest of the board is kind of saying, actually, it's time to either, shape up or ship off. So that was one of the personas that we addressed, and particularly the persona we came up with was someone who actually was feeling the burden of carrying that chair responsibility, who'd maybe come into it with the passion and with the skill and with the development desire, but over the years had ended up carrying this burden of key person dependency, of being the one who had to be the one who kept everything going and carrying on and wasn't perhaps moving with the times. So we've got some things we're wanting to develop in that space, particularly around deputy chairs. And I know that one of the other questions that's highlighted is that deputy chairs aren't that common on a number of boards. Perhaps they should be, because they're really great development pathways for people, the same way that chairing audit and risk committees and other things give you some of that chairing experience. And having some deputy chairs who are developing and pushing the other chairs around them, we think is going to be critically important. We did have some conversations about how do you deal with difficult chairs, how do you deal with board dynamics, how do you deal with succession issues. Those are going to be some of the micro training issues that we're going to have to work our way through. But some of those will be really tricky ones that board's going to need to get some extra support on.
Mm. And Marie's asked, should chairs be the change managers or should the entire board be? KP, while you're in...
Yeah, great question as well. It is the whole board, right? The chair doesn't, despite what there may be a few little pieces of court cases that sort of say the chair's a little more responsible, has to be paying attention. But, we're all responsible, the same way that all of us are responsible for the finances. We're all responsible for the vision and the strategy. It's not just one person's job. It's not just the chair's job. So it is responsibility for the whole board, but we know that boards is the one, the chair is the one who's really holding the pen on setting the agenda. The chair is the one who's holding the kind of the mantle for the speaking stick, and who gets to contribute, and how sort of board strategy sessions are being run, and how new voices get invited into boardrooms, whether that's having visitors come in, or they still have a lot of influence over the appointment process, etc. So while it's a shared responsibility, it is really critically important that for boards to flourish and reach their full potential, that the chairs of those organisations are really open-minded and are open to new voices and feel supported too.
Mm. Awesome. Kim Brinsden asks whether government has given us any funding for this initiative. This thing keeps moving. Can people stop making amendments to the chat, because it keeps jumping around for me? So where am I? Yes, government gave a little bit of money, the Department of Internal Affairs gave a little bit of money alongside Rata Foundation, Foundation North, and the other initial sponsors right at the beginning. It was a very small amount. And as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at a funding bid, a budget bid. Through DIA, obviously for much bigger pingers for the implementation of the action plan going forward. May Seeger, sorry, I'm just reading this now. How can we incentivize or encourage? So how are we going to market this initiative? So thankfully, to date, all of the CSI communications that we've been adopting have been really, really effective the whole way along. So this is why we want to build up the database of all of our contacts. So it's mostly through direct email, but also the general broad comms. So there's a huge communications and media plan that's going to be activated it's being activated already, thanks to Suzanne McNichol's work and others. So we're going to be doing some, and Joe's written an opinion piece in Stuff and other media publications. So we're doing as much as we can to publicise the action plan and where to from here. And yeah, we just really are encouraging people to get in contact with us so that they can stay in touch, but also engage with the actions that we've proposed and provide support, etc. Karen. Okay, agree totally with Tony's point on all of us needing to get better understanding of the communities we'll serve, and the opportunity is how we collaboratively share the information we have about our communities. Can I put the challenge out to the community trust sector to be a leader in this conversation in each of their regions? Right, that's a good one. Is there anyone here who's actively involved with Sue McCabe, I know you aren't part of a community trust, but you engage with all of the community trusts at Philanthropy New Zealand. Did you want to provide a comment there?
Thank you. And yes, I can't claim to speak on behalf of the community trusts, but you know, they are very active members of Philanthropy New Zealand. And I mean, obviously this initiative has been hugely supported by 2 community trusts already, Rata Foundation and Foundation North. Apologies if I'm missing anyone else out. And you know, they're really watching this initiative with interest, and because they do really care about governance in their regions, and a lot of the community trusts are really networked with other funders in their region, and I'm sure we will be seeing lots of discussion about the role that they and other philanthropic funders can play in terms of seeing some of the objectives and the actions of the plan come into fruition.
Well, I am a trustee of the Wellington Community Trust, and my immediate reaction is absolutely, I think that's a really good idea, Karen, and it is in our interest as a trust to get really good intel and information and data about the communities that we serve in our Wellington, in our broader Wellington region. And it's actually why at our last board meeting, we approved for some research to be conducted, because we haven't done this in a long time apparently, and we don't have access to really good data. So we're going to be we're going to be undertaking some research ourselves to get some really good information to better understand the communities we're trying to serve. Okay, Paul McGregor. If implementation is to be collaborative, how can people contribute and work together? Is this an invite-only collaboration or an open door collaboration? Absolutely, Paul, this is open door. We've never been exclusive. Right at the beginning, when we launched this initiative in December of last year, we put the broad call out for people who wanted to be involved in the project to let us know. And basically between early December and February, we had 120 people or plus say that they wanted to be involved in this in the project, and all of them who offered were invited to participate in the sprint process. So look, very much we welcome everybody's offers. Please get in touch with us. Project Manager Extraordinaire Joe is going to do a wonderful job in trying to distill all the different offers that we get and really maximize everybody's willingness to help. Does that answer it well enough, Joe? Did you want to add an extra word while I look at the next question?
Melee, just
yes.
While you're doing that,
Monica.
just also to say that people can also spread the word. You know, people that are here today, someone was asking around before the promotion of this work. I think it's, incumbent on all of us that can see the need for this to help promote it, get it out there through the networks. Like you say, we've taken a very inclusive, adaptive approach to this work, and we will continue, I'm talking on behalf of the whole team involved here, to do that through the next stages, which will be the development and implementation of the projects that people have heard about today. So.
Okay, thanks for that, Monica. Somebody has basically said, are we concerned that this will be another drain on existing sources of funding for non-profits? Many frontline non-profits, many of whom are essential services, are struggling greatly in terms of funding. So is our project and our need for funding in order to implement these actions going to be a drain on the funding that goes to the community sector anyway? Now, my immediate reaction is that no, it won't be, and it shouldn't be, and we don't want it to be. But Tony, did you have a comment on that, given that with your TPK hat on in government?
Well, it was probably more around, it's probably more around that we need to understand our landscape. And so there's a piece of work to be done around understanding all the players in the sector. So I think that's a key element to it. And once we have that data, we can then make more informed, I guess, decisions, or, that can inform us in terms of seen whether or not there's going to be an impact, because I think one of the things we had discussed also is, you know, the case studies, understanding, so that understanding of the communities, those ones that have struggled post-COVID, for example, some of those community, small community organisations. So having that understanding is an important part of framing, you know, what we're trying to do.
Millie, I'd also add that a lot of the research shows the actual cost on organisations of governance that is poor, and the lost opportunities and the, you know, the lack of impact through poor governance on those frontline staff and the organisations. And so if you look at it from that frame, an investment in getting the governance right and improving the quality of governance will help everybody, and include the main driver for this is that we want our community organisations to be able to do what they do amazingly well and do it even better because they've got good governance driving that process.
Awesome. Naisi Chen asks us to elaborate on how this action plan could help marginalised ethnic community groups, and also how would this support young people to learn governance? Who'd like to have a go at that one?
I'm going to hand this back over to Simon. This was something that was very much discussed in the pipeline, because diversity wasn't just, as somebody's made a mention, it definitely wasn't about just gender diversity. Obviously that's important, but it was diversity across all dimensions, and the idea of young people and those communities that perhaps don't naturally, you know, find their way to tables was a real focus of that sprint. So Simon, you could perhaps talk about the actions coming there.
And one of the key things that came through was that ability, the need to partner with those community groups that know these individuals, but they're only, and I said in one of my comments, only visible within that community. So we are really relying on, you know, Kumara doesn't speak of how sweet it is. We are really relying on those communities to sort of say, you are sweet, and we would encourage you for, you know, for your development, or as a, you know, just to give back to the community, to put yourself forward. So I think that was where we are. You know, it's not just relying on individuals in their own little world to say, I'm going to put my hand up. We partner with these groups that know these individuals that have been part of the whānau or been part for a long time. That's how we're going to hopefully get that. I think someone also made a really good point around showcasing this, and you are what you can see. So if we've seen those individuals that have come that don't have a deep governance background but have paved the way, and we showcase that, I think those are the two initiatives that are going to make this a well-worn pathway rather than a theoretical pathway.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. Sarah talks about what support is available for managers and board needing to recruit new board members. So this is around, I'm aware many people work part-time, and under is also recruiting people, especially on a volunteer basis, takes time and commitment, especially if multiple people leave at the same time. Also, how much research has been done on board turnover? I'm just wondering, given all the valued work that will be done to build up governance, how do we ensure those skills are retained when people leave? Joe,
I can jump in there just really briefly.
Go for it.
Just because that had multifaceted, and KP will probably talk to some of that as well. But I think we need to recognise too that I'm concerned sometimes that it's seen as governance as the holy grail, and you haven't been successful contributing until you get to the governance. It's sort of like, you know, when I do my coaching advising for individuals, it used to be you aspire to an NZX listed public company position, and until you get there, you haven't been successful. I haven't heard that in the last few years. I think that everyone understands that they can contribute to governance in a certain area and be really happy with that, you know, with that. And I also think that, you know, there's so many ways we can, as volunteers, can contribute to community organisations, and that governance isn't for everyone. You know, for some people find it a little bit too structured, or that it's, you know, that working in that team environment isn't for them. So I wouldn't want this program to create that expectation that you must contribute to governance, and if you don't, you're not pulling your weight. It's one way to contribute. It's not the only way.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really good point to end. And so, yeah, on behalf of the steering group for community governance, just to mention, remind you that we are going to be putting the FAQ document up on the CSR website, where hopefully the unanswered questions that we haven't been able to get to today, we'll provide some comments on those and post that up in the FAQ document. So on behalf of the steering group for community governance and CSI and everyone involved in organising today's event, I'd like to thank again all our presenters and everyone who contributed to the design sprints. I'd also like to thank the initial sponsors who supported the project to get us to this point. Our biggest thanks, whakawhetai tele lava, go to you for giving up our precious time, your precious time, to participate today. Thanks for your interest and involvement in the kaupapa of community governance, and we hope you found today interesting and useful for your mahi, and we wish you all the best for the future. I'd like to ask Matua Kevin to say the karakia whakamutunga to bring our formalities to a close.
Kia ora mele. Just unmuting myself. To close our hui today, tēnei karakia whakamutunga, unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te urutapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara tangata, ko i ara e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga, kia tīna.
Tīna.
Hui e.
Tai ki e.
Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora koe, Kevin. So thanks again, everyone. A reminder that you can read the full report here and get involved. So look forward to hearing from you. Kia ora koutou katoa, and let's all strive for the vision where all community organisations in Aotearoa are well governed. Haere rā.